Welcome to the second Fatherhood Friday. We are so excited that you returned. If you joined us for the first one 2 weeks ago, or we're glad that you're joining us for the first time today if you haven't been able to. And for those of you who have been participating in the Fatherhood Summits over the last 5 years, we are so grateful to have you here as well. Before we begin, there's a few housekeeping things that I'm supposed to go over with you. And the first is to let you know that this webinar is going to be posted on the CFRP Fatherhood Friday event page. That will come out next week, and the link will be sent to you. But there you can also see the Fatherhood Friday from 2 weeks ago, in which Ron Mincy was our guest speaker. And we were able to highlight all of the amazing videos that are sharing the programs across the state. So we encourage you to go to the Father Resource Hub to visit the CFRP Fatherhood page and make sure that you're able to see all of the amazing resources that we have for you. We also encourage you to submit questions or comments into the box that is below your screen. If you could include your name and organization, we'd appreciate that. We will try to have the panelists today be able to answer your questions. And if we can't get to everyone, or there's a topic outside of what we can cover today, we'll try to cover it in subsequent events, or to provide resources for you directly. So please let us know what you're thinking and communicate with us. Also, if there are any technical difficulties that you experience, there's a button on your screen below or below the screen that says technical support. Click that and hopefully magic will happen to help you out in any way. But we've also learned that just refreshing your computer screen sometimes helps to resolve any of the problem. That seems to always be what happens with me. I just have to unplug and plug it back in. But this time, just refresh your screen, and we hope that that will resolve any technical difficulties that you might have. Finally, if you are on social media, we want you to let the world know that you support fathers and that you're here with us today. So if you use Twitter, use the hashtag TXDads2020. And if you follow us at CFRPLBJ, we will retweet you. And we hope that you join us there and share everything that you're learning here today with others. And let's see, if you need to use the restrooms, no, I'm joking. I lament the fact that we're not all together in person. This is not my calling to be a live news anchor, but I am so glad that you've joined us and that we're able to, at the very least, bring folks together to talk about this extremely important topic today. I am Cynthia Osborne, and I'm the director of the Child and Family Research Partnership at the University of Texas at Austin's LBJ School of Public Affairs. And we are so privileged to be able to host these events for you. And it is based on the generous support from Sasha Roscoe and folks at the Prevention and Early Intervention Division of the Texas Department of Family and Protective Services. They fund numerous programs across the state to support fathers and families in general. And these Texas Fatherhood Summits are a place that we gather to talk about how organizations can make sure that they're doing all they can to support fathers in their roles as parents and partners. And we know that fathers play a hugely important role in their children's lives, in their families' lives, and in our society. But often our social services are aimed at helping mostly moms and their children, and we often leave fathers kind of out of the equation. Your organizations over the years have really worked to try to make your programs welcoming to fathers and to provide services that meet their unique and specific needs while making sure that the whole family is served and that the kids' outcomes are improved. We have really loved learning from you over the years and look forward to learning more. But one of the areas that you have consistently mentioned as something that affects the fathers that you serve is their mental health needs and their emotional well-being. And today we're going to address this important topic. I'm really excited to hear from the panelists that we have been able to pull together for you today. This is the first of many conversations that we need to have about this topic. We know that a father's mental health affects his ability to be a father and to be a partner, his ability to work and to participate and contribute meaningfully to our society. And when we use the term mental health, we mean a lot of different things. We certainly mean things that have to do with very severe diagnosable concerns, such as depression or bipolar disorder or alcoholism. But we also mean his emotional well-being and how he feels about himself as a father and the role that he plays in his children's lives and in society. And over the years, I have heard from so many of you that fathers sometimes don't feel like they can trust to really open up to you and let you serve them, that they have longstanding fears about trusting others, and that they don't necessarily believe in themselves. I've heard from judges about how they had to learn that when veterans or first responders are wearing dark sunglasses or needing to sit with their back against the wall so that no one's behind them, that this is not an indication of disrespect, but an indication of post-traumatic stress disorder from their service. And I've heard about fathers who have been incarcerated and don't feel like they're worthy to re-enter society, much less their children's lives. And we know that the long-standing persistent racism in this country has had a devastating effect on many of our fathers, and especially our Black fathers and our Latino fathers, and that this is an issue that we as a country need to address collectively. When fathers face struggles with their mental health needs, they also struggle in their relationships and as fathers, as partners, and again, in their role as members of our society. So we hope that today's speakers illuminate these issues for you and provide some guidance of how you can support them, but to also know about the amazing programs that are going on across our state that are really trying to address these important issues. And we look forward, again, to learning more from you about what more we can do. Our first speaker is Judge Ed Emmitt. And he's not available to be with us live today, but he did record a message that he wanted to share with all of you. For those of you who are familiar with Judge Emmitt, you know that fathers and their mental health needs is something that he has been a champion for many years. And this issue first became very salient to him when he was a Harris County's judge from 2007 to 2019. He has a long history of being a public leader in our state as a commissioner and a representative, and he's currently a professor of practice at Rice University. But his call to help fathers in their mental health challenges, the need for our society to recognize these challenges, and the role that he plays as a champion of supporting our fathers and families is really why we have asked him to join today. And I'm looking forward to the messages that he's going to share with you. So thank you.
So I wish we could all be together anywhere and be having this summit, because fatherhood and mental health are obviously two issues that are vitally important to me and to many other people. In just a few minutes, let me sort of tell you why this is so important. When I was 4 years old, I lived in New London, Texas, which is a very small community in East Texas. And the reason I know I was 4 is because I hadn't gone to kindergarten yet. And every morning I would go to the window and my mother would drive my father to a little office building. And that office building was right across the road from where we lived, maybe 100, 150 yards, not much farther than that. And I would always wave and say goodbye. Thought nothing of it. Fast forward to when I was in high school and living in Tyler, Texas. My parents had moved there. My father had been transferred. He worked for Humble Oil. They changed the name to Exxon later on. He never agreed to that name change, by the way, so he always worked for Humble Oil. And when I got my driver's license, it was just understood that I would go pick him up at his office building, which was farther away in Tyler as it would be in a larger town. So every afternoon I'd go and pick him up at the office and take him home. And I didn't think anything of it. And then at the very end of my junior year, with maybe 5 weeks left, I was suddenly told he had been transferred to Houston and that I was going to go with him. And I went, well, wait a minute. I'm almost through with my junior year in high school. How about I just wait and after school's out? It was at that point that I was told that my father had a panic disorder and he couldn't be alone. And all those years, children being self-centered as they are, I never bothered to ask, why does somebody always have to be with him at all the time? When he took me on the weekends to go places, I thought he just really liked me, and that's why we went places together. But no, it turns out he had developed a panic disorder way back in the 1940s, and he couldn't be alone. So when he gets to Houston, I'll shorten the story somewhat. He had to work in a downtown office building, 44 stories high. So there were friends that would meet him at the elevator and make sure he wasn't alone riding on the elevator. They'd come get him for lunch. It was that kind of self-medication, self-caring that got him through his whole life. And my mother worked at J.C. Penney out in Meyerland Mall, and he would ride the bus. Keep in mind, there's always somebody on the bus, driver if nobody else. And he would ride that bus out to Meyerland Mall, and he would walk around the mall until she got off at 9 o'clock at night. He was a gregarious sort of guy, so never any trouble. People liked him. As I became an adult, me and my 3 sisters, we all kind of badgered him over there. Why aren't you getting some help? Why aren't you getting some help? Turns out he had gone to Galveston back in the 1940s. They treated him with shock treatments, and he basically said, hell with this. I'm not doing this anymore. So he never would go back, and he never would. But he was willing to talk to some close friends because obviously they knew his circumstance. But I didn't growing up. I let it go, and then I became county judge. And in a conversation early, I knew nothing about criminal justice particularly. Early on, I realized that probably a third of the inmates in the Harris County Jail on any given day are given some kind of psychotropic drug. They have mental health conditions. And almost immediately a switch went off in my head to where I said, well, you know what? If my father had not been a middle-class white male dressed like an oil company employee, he probably would have been arrested for vagrancy out there at Meyerland Mall. He probably would have been one of those people in the Harris County Jail. Fortunately, he wasn't. But it was the most sort of slap in the face moment of my policy career to suddenly say the intersection of mental health and the criminal justice system. And it was all tied to my father. So this summit being about fatherhood, he was a great father. He was always there for me, or I was always there for him, one way or the other. And I just can't let go of that image. And I will tell you, I'll admit to some saying self-centered as a child. Later on, I was kind of cut to the core, rightfully so, by my mother one time. I forget what I was complaining about. And she said, well, Edie, because she called me Edie, think about this. All those days that he was taking that bus from downtown, you were at Rice University many of those days. Did you ever ask him to stop and have dinner with you? And the answer was no. And I felt about, that tall. It's one of those things you wish you could go back and change. And so that was another eye-opening moment. If we know somebody that's got a mental health disorder, we've got to take some extra steps. And we've got to make sure. Now, go to where we are today. I grew up in the Ward and June Cleaver, Father Knows Best, all kinds of era, where we had families that were defined a certain way. That's not true now. We've had people recently who it's turned out, yes, they have 4 or 5 children by all these different folks, and they're not necessarily married. And it's way too easy to say, oh, well, that's just horrible. that shouldn't exist, but it does exist. And those are fathers. So our definition of fatherhood even has to be moved, whether we like it or not. A father is a father. So how do we make sure, and frequently many of those people are also in the criminal justice system or also have a mental health issue. When it became obvious that there were a lot of people in the Harris County Jail that were really there for mental health reasons, and it became apparent that mental health was still unfortunately separated from overall healthcare. It's really not. It really ought to just be part of healthcare. Then we needed to figure a way so that people who were continually being arrested or at least picked up, maybe even if they weren't arrested, but they were picked up for minor things, and their underlying issue was mental health. How could we get out of that? And so Houston Police Department, Harris County Sheriff's Office, the Harris County Mental Health Center, everybody involved realized that what we needed to do was divert people that were getting arrested and rearrested and rearrested and rearrested, and divert them out of the criminal justice system if we know their problem was mental health. And so my staff did a study, and the numbers may be off just a little bit, but we asked over a 2-year period, how many people in Harris County had been arrested at least 5 times? 5 times. And the answer came back over 8,000. Well, these are clearly not hardened criminals. There may be 1 or 2 in the bunch, but they're people who have an issue. And so rather than constantly rearresting, going through the court system, spending, and I'll do it as a fiscal conservative, why keep spending money on criminal justice, which is expensive, when that's not the real issue? So we were fortunate to be able to get funding for a mental health diversion project through the legislature, 2 different legislative sessions. And it ultimately ended up with what is now the Mental Health Diversion Center in Harris County. And it's got my name on it, which I must say is flattering, but I almost wish it had my father's name on it. Somehow it would make a little bit more sense, because if it hadn't been that experience, I probably wouldn't have been as involved as I was. So Harris County's taken the right step. And I will confess, we actually learned some of that from what Bexar County was doing. And I think all over the world, or all over the country anyway, people are beginning to recognize the importance of mental health diversion from the criminal justice system. And there's no ignoring the fact most of those people involved are men. And I would guess, without knowing any hard facts, I would guess that most of those men are fathers. So another reason for us to be looking at this whole question of fatherhood and mental health. So I think to start having a conversation regularly about fatherhood, about mental health, what do those 2 terms mean? I think it's one of the most important things we can do for society. And that's why I really wish we could all be together. But that's why I was absolutely adamant that I wanted to at least speak to you before the summit began. So thank you very much for participating today, and good luck. And I hope we all keep this momentum going. Thank you.
It's always so great to hear Judge Emmett's stories and the work that he did in Harris County to really try to reform the system and to make effective changes for our fathers, for our men, for our families, and ultimately for the kids in those communities. We are joined, though, live with a panel today that really are also champions of this work and have done so much in their own communities. And we're going to hear much more from them and give you an opportunity to ask questions and make sure that we can answer them. Dorothy Mandel is going to moderate the panel for us. And Dr. Dorothy Mandel is an assistant professor at UT Health Sciences at Tyler. And she also leads the Collaborative for Healthy Mothers and Babies, which has a name that may not seem to align well with today's work, but she's always the voice that's saying, talking about the effect that fathers actually have on mother's health and baby's health. And she's an expert in maternal and child health as well. She is also the primary investigator for Safe Babies, which is an intervention that focused on fathers. And next Fatherhood Friday, in 2 weeks from now, she's going to provide much more information on that program. But for now, I ask you to join me in welcoming Dr. Dorothy Mandel, who is an amazing scholar and a wonderful friend. Dorothy?
I am so excited to be here, and I hope I'm able to stay on this throughout the panel. Father mental health is a big issue for a lot of the work that I do, and I'm so excited to have a session dedicated to talking about this issue. It's such an important issue. So what I'm going to do is first introduce our first panelist, and then our second panelist after Judge Kazen speaks. So Judge Oscar Kazen is the presiding judge of Bexar County Probate Court 1 and has previously served as an associate at probate court for the Bexar County Probate Court 1, as well as presiding of Bexar County Court Law Number 9. I'm a researcher, not a legal scholar, so sorry about that, Judge Kazen. During his 16 years of judicial service, he has presided in over 100 jury trials without reversal or reprimand. And shortly after his appointment in 2007, he realized his passion for individuals with mental health illnesses in the justice system. Judge Kazen created and oversaw the implementation of the first fully operational silver AOT court in Texas. And AOT courts are outpatient treatment courts for people going through the justice system. And served at the intersection between law and treatment of individuals with serious mental illness in a 52-county area. This court has served a national model saving lives and lessening the suffering of those with serious mental health illness by offering an alternative to hospitalization. Prior to his appointment as an associate probate judge, he served as the presiding judge of the Bexar County Court Law Number 9 and was managing partner of Kazen and Robertson. Judge Kazen earned his JD from Thurgood Marshall School of Law and his BA from the University of Texas. And before attending college, Judge Kazen served as the United States Marine Corps. So he's married to Melissa. So Judge Kazen, I'm happy to turn this over to you and hear about the work that you've been doing in Bexar County.
Thank you, Dr. Mandel. I think all of you told me we've got about 7 minutes to kind of talk about mental health, what it means to us, and then we'd go on to the moderation. Let me tell you what the worst thing, and I have been a judge since 2002 in one form or another, and let me tell you what the worst thing that can happen and the best thing that ever happened to me as a judge. Early on, I lost an election by 12 votes. It was one of those wave type elections. It was 12 votes. I could have hugged everyone on this panel and still been that judge. But I got to tell you, it focused who I am and what is important in life. And the one thing I remember from that first experience as a judge was this moment. You see, we had created what is called a therapeutic drug court, not a place where you punish criminals, but where you treat individuals that have addiction in the county court of law. And there was about 3 or 4 judges. We took the National Drug Court Institute training. I came back and I helped create one of those courts in Bexar County. Back then, everybody was talking about being tough on crime. So here I am sitting on my bench, counting down until the next judge comes on. And let me tell you the second secret. The second worst thing you can ever tell a judge, besides you've lost an election, is, do you remember me? The red flags go up every time somebody says that. There's about a 50% chance somebody will hug you and a 50% chance somebody will slap you. Well, I'm sitting on the bench. It's towards the end, and the doors open in the back of the courtroom, and an individual walks in the middle of my docket. And I look over at him. I catch his attention. He looks at me, and he says, "Hey, Judge, do you remember me?" So, I'm thinking, okay, here it comes. He reaches in his pocket as he's walking to the bar. That's that divider between the gallery and the courtroom. That's why they sometimes call it passing the bar. And he gets up there, reaches in his pocket, and I thought, wow, what a perfect ending to all of this. Good gosh. And he throws this thing at me across a nice little log, and I caught it. Now, it took me a second to realize what they were. They were 24 NaAHs. And I still get a little emotional when I think about it. And he says to me, he says, I know you lost your election, but I couldn't let you leave without knowing this. I was one of your very first drug court graduates early on. I've been sober for more than 2 years, and I don't want you to leave this bench without knowing you made a difference. I've kept those darn chips with me ever since, through being a family law judge, a mental health judge, a probate judge. Because in the end, what matters is how we help people. And that's why this forum we're doing to help parents understand mental illness, how it affects them, and be better fathers matters. And that's so here I am many years later, I'm on the bench, and I get the privilege of helping create one of the first mental health courts in Bexar County, civil outpatient mental health courts. And we said, let's break the system. Let's do what we did in the drug courts. Let's get people into treatment instead of into jail. In this case, into treatment and out of a hospital, so we can help them understand their illness and help them get to where they need to be. And we created a therapeutic assisted outpatient treatment. We had a lot of help from an organization in Washington called the Treatment Advocacy Center. And we took this thing and made it a model. And it's all premised on one thing. The first time I heard a mental health case, and let me go backwards a little bit. After I lost that election, I was immediately hired to be the mental health judge, which was amazing to me. And I went down to the San Antonio State Hospital, in an abandoned part of the hospital, where we had this little teeny courtroom that's been there forever in the basement of that hospital. 2 flags and a folding table. And I thought, I've done 100 jury trials. I've done 10,000 dispositions. This is nothing. And I sat there, and the first person who came in was a young child who was so grossly psychotic, and that usually doesn't happen to children, that she was eating the tips of her fingers because she thought they were snakes. And wow. And then after that child came a 10-year-old child and a 12-year-old child. And then it was a teenager who tried to hang herself. And I thought, how can you give up life so young? And then it was a young adult. And then it was somebody's father and somebody's mother and somebody's sister and somebody's child. And all I could think of is what this discussion is today. I hate the term "they are mentally ill." They are us. We are them. There is no difference between any of us but the snap of a finger. Something that caused something that makes a condition that controls their lives. And it's our duty, it's our task on this world to make a difference in their life. And it's our duty and our task to understand they are us, we are them. There is no separation. It's all depending on which side of the glass you're looking through. So I hope in some small way today, when we discuss mental illness and how it affects dads, and you understand that it's not them we're talking about, it's us. And if you do wish to say they are somebody's child, they're somebody's son, they're somebody's dad, they're somebody's grandfather, husband, wife. They're us, we're them. And I just want to, before I pass it back to you, say, I just want to acknowledge what this means, giving people a chance to ask, giving people a chance to understand that it's just a condition. It's a manageable condition. It doesn't make you who you are. You have to learn it. You have to understand it. You have to treat it so that you can get on to the things in life that do matter. That part where you can hug your child and your son or your daughter and watch them grow old and gray by your side. And that's what I think this is about. I'm not trying to be melodramatic. about this, even though it sounds melodramatic. This is life. And this is how we make a difference, I think, in people's lives. So if you have any questions of me in that regard, however I can help.
Thank you so much, Judge Kazen. And I'm really excited to come back and ask you some questions later on and have a discussion. So right now, I would like to introduce Kevin Johnson. Kevin is proud to be part of the Positive Recovery team from its inception in the role of executive director. He's been imputed with a verb to serve, and Kevin is an LCDC who brings 14 years of experience to the substance abuse treatment field, as well as 25 years of customer service and management experience. Both of these drive his passion for helping clients and families in crisis obtain the help that they seek. Kevin is happily married to the love of his life and is fortunate to have 2 dogs that take him for walks regularly. So, Kevin, I'm turning it over to you.
It is truly an honor to be a part of this series. I've long been a fan of Judge Kazen's work and the influence he's had here in Harris County. Positive Recovery Centers works closely with the Star Drug Court and the RIC courts. And I know that his groundbreaking work is saving lives way outside of where he practices. And I'm grateful for his being the pioneer and trailblazer in this area. When we think about treating substance use disorders, we know that mental health has to be a significant component. Over the years, the model has definitely shifted to include mental health treatment, while once upon a time they were separately addressed. About 75% of our clients have co-occurring mental health diagnoses. Many more have mental health symptoms that are not diagnosed. To attempt to treat one without the other is not likely to be successful, as we know both occur in the brain. And addiction is, at its root, a brain disease. It is also common for people experiencing mental health symptoms to self-medicate, inadvertently worsening the problem. We see depression, anxiety disorders, bipolar disorders, schizophrenia, schizoaffective disorders daily. And while we as a company coordinate care with outside providers, we support mental health treatment through both pharmacological interventions as well as behavioral interventions. In terms of treating men specifically, the most common co-occurring mental health symptom that we see is depression. And I think it's one of the most pernicious, as it often goes undiagnosed. That's possibly because symptoms in men can be very different than what we think about when we think about depression. You know, one of the first visible symptoms of depression in men is anger, frustration, lower frustration tolerance, irritability. And with that comes a deterioration of social connections, increased anxiety, withdrawal, lack of motivation, and increased lethargy. So often men are either expected to or expect themselves to provide and protect for their families, not complain, help others, but not ask for help for themselves. This particular view of masculinity is socially supported through media images, common stereotypes, and it can lead to men feeling trapped, not knowing how, not recognizing the need, or even having language to ask for help. This again increases likelihood of substance use as a self-medication strategy. Through that self-medicating cycle, men typically experience increased shame and guilt, feelings of not being good enough, not being able to provide enough, and just a general sense of failure and a sense of doom, of foreboding. This concept of the stoic male can be passed down generationally, which inadvertently creates fathers who have few practical parenting or nurturing skills. In terms of how we address clients at Positive Recovery, we recognize each individual as the expert in themselves. We seek to help clients identify what drives them intrinsically. We help them find what is their why. Our approach with each client is collaborative as opposed to paternalistic. When we look at addiction as developing when happiness is pursued ineffectively. Conversely, recovery is when people learn to pursue happiness in a more effective manner. We lead and empower clients as they learn to fulfill their needs in a healthier way by intervening early, by normalizing use instead of using shame or focusing solely on the negative. In turn, we appreciate that relapse is really just use, a return of an ineffective and maladaptive attempt to be happy. That being said, we don't rely on wishful thinking. Our work is based on multiple lines of evidence and clinical expertise. Positive recovery's approach includes concepts, tools, and skills from various fields and theories, including most notably positive psychology, but also clinical psychology, sociology, psychiatry, medicine, along with motivational interviewing, cognitive behavioral therapy, 12-step facilitation and integration, mindfulness-based stress reduction, and mindfulness-based relapse prevention strategies. When a client first comes into treatment with us, one of their first assignments is to take the values in action, or VIA, character strength survey. VIA.org states that the VIA classification describes 24 character strengths that are thought to be fundamental building blocks of character. These building blocks are universally considered to be qualities that define and lead people to being their best. Character strengths are defined as capacities for thinking, feeling, and behaving, and every one of us possesses each of these 24 character strengths. That's very key, in different degrees, resulting in unique profiles that constitute the rich array of human personalities. What the survey does is it ranks each client's particular strengths in order of the ones they use the most, down to the ones they use the least. We use this to assist in establishing a new way of giving clients a new way of seeing themselves, talking about themselves, as well as a new way of seeing others, relating to others. One based on strengths that they already possess, instead of identifying with their sense of failure, shame, depression, or other symptoms. It's really important that people shift that concept of not everything I do is wrong because I have a substance use disorder or because I have a mental health symptom. When we begin to identify the different strengths that people exhibit, we can appreciate them in new ways and deepen those interpersonal connections. We also begin to experience ourselves in new ways, and we know the number one indicator of happiness once basic needs are met are the strengths of these interpersonal connections. So anything we can do to build those up is a massive protective factor. We know that when we're treating a client, we are also working to heal the whole family system. We know that when family members are involved in a loved one's treatment, outcomes are significantly better. In every level of care, there's an opportunity for family involvement, both individually with the counselor and as a group, as well as family education and direct families-only support groups. As men learn to deepen their interpersonal connections, to work and engage in a mindful way, develop resiliency skills, exploring and developing an optimistic explanatory style, learning effective and assertive communication skills, they become happier. They begin to feel hope for the first time, a return of hope. They have increased self-efficacy and begin to model all of these traits of healthy living for their children. When we focus on building up the positive, we assist our clients in creating a life that is filled with protective factors that are the number one line of defense against return to substance use. By learning to identify and develop their character strengths, clients are now able to spot these strengths in their children and partners. The mindset is contagious. One of the main models we employ for helping men and all of our clients find and create a meaningful life is based on the acronym PERMA. It was created by Dr. Martin Seligman. PERMA stands for positive emotion, which is optimally directed attention, thought, actions, engagement or finding flow, relationships, meaning, and achievement. By focusing on these 5 areas of our lives, we become happier, we become more engaged, and our life has more meaning. We also stress the importance of gratitude as a practice, not just a feeling. By practicing gratitude, we can begin to rewire the brain away from the negativity bias, developing a new relationship with the self, learning to challenge and refute negative internal dialogue, which in turn forms new neural pathways that support a more optimistic outlook. We know addiction affects the entire family, so does recovery. Again, I'd like to say thank you for being asked to participate in this series. Healing families is my passion and my why. And with that, I'll turn it back over to Dorothy.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate both of you and both of your perspectives on this. This is a really interesting conversation because we both of you guys are coming at this from a mental health side, from a crisis perspective. And one of the things that I come at from the lens I come at father's mental health from is from a prevention perspective. And so I was wondering if you could both talk a little bit about upstream prevention and where you see, from your crisis perspective, how we can improve this prevention safety net for fathers and for men, because I feel like we've invested a lot of time and a lot of effort in it for women. And how do we get to that point where we can start equalizing the investment for men? And where?
So that's the $1 million question. I think that the key to anything begins with early education. The sooner we can start talking about shifting ideas of what it means to be a man, what it means to be a father, what mental health means, and how it's addressed in our society. As Judge Kazen said earlier, or I'm sorry, Judge Emmett said earlier, mental health should be part of health. It's just health. That really is the key. Gender roles are passed on in lots of ways, and I think gender roles are one of the reasons that we have some of the problems we have specifically related to fathers, because they are unable to ask for help, and the expectations that they feel like are put on them are require them to not ask for help. How to address that? I think it's a multi-pronged model. I think education for men, for young men, education for women as well. I know brilliant women who inadvertently fall back on unreasonable stereotypes of men, not even knowing that they're doing it. It's so ingrained in our society. When it comes to mental health, the more education, the better. We should be teaching mental health, communication skills, and all of that as early as possible, because that just helps us relate better to other people.
And I would add, this whole discussion between upstream and downstream, and the time I've been doing this it's a divide actually between professionals and how we attack this. I mean, and you are correct, doctor. For every psychiatrist and PhD or doctor that I see, they want to focus on the upstream, and of course, judges and treatment individuals, we focus on the downstream. That's after they come in, and we're both competing for the same dollars. And so obviously, more funding makes that go away. But in this particular circumstance, where you're talking about young men and husbands and fathers, how do we get them upstream so I never have to deal with them downstream, committing them to an institution, putting them in treatment? I think education is part one, and part two has to be a reduction of stigma. I mean, when it comes to the way men in particular, I don't mean to be chauvinistic about this, and I hope I don't sound chauvinistic, but there's something wired in men that they are going to even longer than others hold on to that issue because they don't want anybody to know it's there, either because they sense that it's a shame, or they sense that it's something wrong with them, or they sense that they're letting everyone down under the pressures they feel they have. And all of that comes from this stigma that says, I'm not, and forgive me for using the term, I'm not crazy, I'm not mentally ill, I'm not broken. So until we educate people about understanding that this condition does nothing more than make them perfectly human, and until we change the way we react to the term mental illness, and until we do those things, let me rephrase that. When we do those things, you're going to see a much greater access to the upstream side of it, I think, for men. Every time somebody comes in for the first time into the system and I talk to them and they have bipolar, for example, or they're seriously depressed, and it's a young man in particular, I ask them this question: what does being bipolar, or schizophrenic, whatever, mean to you? And before they answer, I stop them. I say, let me answer that for you. You know what it means to you? Welcome to being perfectly human. Of all the things that could have happened to you in this world, you've got the one thing you can manage if you learn to manage it. But it's the lack of education and the lack of stigma that drives people to the breaking, men in particular, I think, to the breaking point.
Yeah, that issue of stigma was going to be the next thing I was going to bring up, because it's such a big issue, and it's been a big issue within the field of psychology and psychiatry forever. And how do we just in the past 10 years has been this point where we're starting to have conversations about, Judge Emmett said that mental health issues, and Judge Kazen, you said it too, mental health issues are health issues. We shouldn't separate the two. And the stigma thing is a huge issue. The other thing I wanted to ask you, both of you, was about the community resources around you. And Judge Kazen, this is in particular important for courts and court-ordered treatment. Is there enough mental health support to get men out of your court, to get the treatment that they need in a timely manner?
No. No. I could end it with that one sentence, but I don't want to end it on the negative. Honestly, everything is a perspective for me. We in this group are riding a new wave, and we sometimes forget that. All right. We would not have had this discussion. We wouldn't have even had somebody funding these discussions 10 years ago. We would not have had drug courts 15 years ago. We didn't have diversionary courts at the front door of the jail to get people before they go into the jail to go off into treatment. All those things cost money, and we don't have at this point a well that we can dip from. But so if we concentrate on, do we have enough? No, we don't. But wow, where we are now compared to where we were 10 years ago is amazing. And it's this type of work that I think in 10 or 15 years, someone may look back at this webcast and go, oh, we do so much more now. And even then, I guarantee you, when the moderator asks, do we have enough services and money? Some young judge is going to go, no, because this is an age-old issue. And we need more money, we need more access, we need more funding. And that's why I go back to these. They aren't them, they're us. It's our kids, it's me, it's you, it's everyone, but for a flip of fate. So
yeah. Kevin, I want to bring you in on this conversation too, because you feel this very acutely being in a recovery center.
I absolutely agree with Judge Kazen's assessment that there is not enough support. There's not enough funding for support. I am proud to be from the great state of Texas, but that is one of our shortcomings, is we do spend less on mental health per capita here than most other states. And that is something that I think we can correct. It is also something that I do believe we need to be very cautious about. We need to be deliberate and make sure that we're spending it wisely. But we do need to spend more. We do need to create more of a safety net. And that starts with education, which we know costs money.
Can I add to, as we relate to whether there's enough services, something that's unique to what we do, to this discussion. We were a group of engineers talking about how do we build a bridge from here to there. It's going to cost $10 million, and we have to design for the steel, and here's what it's going to be, and we can build you a bridge. In mental health and addiction, in particular in mental health, you can't just talk about treatment. You can't just talk about therapy. You can't just talk about hospitalizations. You can't just talk about education and stigma. You can't just talk about housing. You can't just talk about employment. You can't just talk about all these things, because the issues in treating mental illness are varied. And that's why I think we go back to, and I agree with Kevin that education, we got to get people to understand that this is a multifaceted thing. You have to understand it it takes a while before you see this huge globe, this huge ball in front of you, with sides to it, and as you rotate it. So I don't mean to seem negative, but we can't beat ourselves up when we go through this, because we do have to understand it's not such a small thing after all. It's a lot of things we have to spend for.
Yeah, definitely. And Yeah, definitely. There's something else I want to go back to, because in the work that I do, this has come up quite a bit. And that is, Kevin, you hit on this, and that is this understanding of even recognizing mental health issues among men, and the difference of the way, especially depression, becomes manifest in men versus how we normally think of it, which is a very female model. And it's taken me 15 years to get to the point where I start talking about it like that. So how, Judge Kazen, how have you seen that difference play out in your court? And then for you, Kevin, like, how have you guys worked through that difference as you educate even men to recognize you're angry because you're depressed?
You have to remember that when they get to the judicial system, and mind you, I'm on the civil side of that judicial system, not the criminal, although I've been on the criminal side. So we're catching them as they've been detained because they became dangerous to somebody, or they had an outburst, or they tried to hurt themselves or commit suicide. So they've gone to a hospital, they've been released, and now I'm saying, look, we're going to figure out a way through the courts to guide you to understanding what's happening. And I think the thing that I do most with people that are depressed, you can't beat somebody over the head with treatment when they're depressed. You can't coerce necessarily treatment, but you have to help them understand that all the individuals that are around them are there to help. And as we get into their lives with treatment, with the court ordering, monitoring, and caseworkers and services, you develop a rapport with them, and they start to see a light, and they start to see a hope that they didn't see before, because they're no longer struggling with depression by themselves. They're struggling with depression with a team. And that's how we try to handle it. And then that depression becomes enlightenment, or forgive me, hope. And then that hope becomes enlightenment. And in many cases, it saves lives.
Mm-hmm.
I hope that answered your question.
Yeah.
I think it did beautifully so, Judge Kazen. I would say almost the exact same thing. When, in my personal practice at Positive Recovery Centers, when I have male clients who are very, very angry, to me, that's a sign right away that I need to investigate depression. There's some shame, there's some guilt, there's some kernel in there that's exhibiting inordinate amounts of pressure. The quickest way to get through those defenses is just to simply radiate positive regard for this client in every interaction. And that's from me as their counselor, from every other counselor, from every staff member, from the kitchen staff to the recovery advocates to nursing, everyone. It's our general approach. And when we treat people with dignity, with respect, and we remind them that by coming into our facility, they are hiring us to work for them. And if we use that collaborative model, it does take some of that pressure off, and they begin to trust. A lot of times that anger is a frustration at an inability to trust anyone. It's a feeling trapped and isolated. And when we can break through a little bit of that, it's amazing how quickly people are willing to push the rest through themselves. You know, positive regard in and of itself is a longstanding practice, and it works. In terms of diffusing anger and being able to allow men to open up more, that's the number one technique that we use. Second to that is providing a language to be able to describe themselves and what they're going through. So many of our clients can't even articulate what they're feeling at any given moment or attach it to any why they're feeling that way. So teaching clients that basic skill is also very important. And then from there, a lot more work gets done that I don't want to go into right now, but that I think is answering your question.
Man, I got to tell you, depression's greatest weapon is isolation. You hit the nail on the head right there. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. So there's a couple of questions that have come through too that I just want to fold into this conversation because they really overlap with some of what I wanted to talk to you guys about as well. And so I feel the need to get the COVID question out of the way, or at least bring it to the forefront because this is such a big issue. And the effect of COVID on isolation and what we fear may be a rise in mental health issues, especially among adults, can't be ignored. So a big question that came through is how has the pandemic influenced the way fathers access care and the way that service providers help this population?
I can take a stab at that on the procedural side. Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, all to the last, I've come to court every single day, to the courthouse every single day through this thing. And we've got webinars and updates and the whole works. And from our perspective, what's killing us on the mental health side is access to emergency services. Right now, the ERs are swamped with COVID. And in most jurisdictions, when a father does become suicidal or manic, or the illness has progressed to the point that they overtly need help, we take them to an ER. The ERs now are packed and they're full. And it's resulting in fewer and fewer people getting into that long-term access of treatment. Because when you compare COVID to somebody who might be stable after, and forgive me for being so simple about it, after an injection or a few pills, go home, under ordinary circumstances, they would try to figure out how to give them access to services and treatment. That's gone. The pressure is to get them in, get them out. Let's keep the bed open for COVID. So practically, what's truly hurting us, at least on the emergency side of it, once someone does become that ill, it's hard to get them in and it's hard to keep them. Then you start talking about whether they have COVID or not. But COVID really has had an impact because in this small world of resources, it's gotten even smaller in access at the intake point, which are usually the ERs for us.
Thank you, Judge. From a treatment standpoint, we are seeing the results of long-term isolation coming into treatment. People who may have been sort of teetering on the edge of substance use disorder, when you take away their reason for getting up in the morning and going to work, that safety net that kind of kept them from overusing substances, we're treating people who, once COVID hit, they began drinking around the clock, right? Because they were at home all day and they could get away with it. And eventually, it did catch up with them, or their family member intervened and said, I'm not going to continue being isolated with you while you're drinking 24/7. Conversely, we're seeing people who, had been sober for 2, 3 years, 6 months, whatever. And their main mechanism for staying sober was going to meetings and engaging with other people in recovery. And that was severely curtailed, or at least modified, by having to do everything on Zoom. Again, back to isolation, which is the one thing they knew prior to recovery. And they don't know how to isolate healthily. They know how to isolate unhealthily. So we are seeing that effect. Now, the flip side of that is, as somebody in recovery and somebody who engages in a 12-step program, I love my community and how we are able to be resilient and adjust. Within 48 hours of the first orders to limit businesses, there were Zoom invitations that just showed up in my Facebook feed from Los Angeles, New York, New Mexico, like across the country. And within a full week, almost every AA meeting here in Houston and NA meeting had a Zoom option. The upside to that, I think, is that will never actually go away. Right now, we will always have the option, once eventually back for live meetings, but also for Zoom meetings, which is a huge gift. Also, we're able to treat, as a treatment center, we're able to use telehealth techniques to treat people who now live or in isolated areas who couldn't get treatment before. So there's definitely pros and cons, but we're adaptive, and if we seek to find ways, if we seek to stay in the solution, we will come up with something. COVID has been very instructional in where our weak points are, but also where our strengths are and where our determination and our grit lie.
Thank you for bringing up that point of the pivot to telehealth, because I wanted to ask specifically about that, because it seems to me, and I'm going to bring this back to you, Kevin. It seems to me like this pivot to telehealth now, it breaks our boundaries, it breaks our geographic borders, and you just mentioned you're actually seeing that for real, that you can now provide services to somebody who doesn't necessarily live in the middle of Houston or live in Houston. You can provide services outside of your area.
Absolutely. And that's massive. Telehealth is something that, as treatment providers, we've been exploring for some time. And it was a matter, frankly, of finding ways that work, that abide by HIPAA guidelines, putting processes in place to make sure it does work, but also getting the insurance providers on board, and some were hesitant. And that's okay. It's good to have multiple viewpoints to make sure that the best services get created and delivered. So I have no complaint about that. But as soon as COVID hit, everybody was on board, insurance providers and everyone, get this to happen now because people need it. And we did. My particular organization, I'm always proud of, but we responded very, very quickly. There was a team of us, mainly led by Julie Denofa, our president, who did a fantastic job of rolling out. Well, actually, in NRO Sandoval, who was originally going to be in this spot on this panel, who piloted that program and made it happen very quickly. Within a week, we had a full process in place. Within 10 days, we were doing Zoom IOP and outpatient services. So it was very impressive.
Kevin, I have to agree with you. The flip side is you obviously want that personal touch, but I grew up in Laredo. I have family spread out through all of South Texas. I am Latino, and especialmente nuestra familia Latino. We don't really access services, but this move towards telemed because of COVID, especially the way it's grown. At first, I wanted that personal touch, but I'm starting to realize it's getting into areas which have traditionally never even heard of a psychiatrist. And I think that's a wonderful thing.
I agree. There's a lot. Texas is a huge state, and there's several major urban areas. There's a lot of areas that aren't. And there's lots of clients that have to drive 40, 50 miles just to go to a meeting, not to mention services, like some sort of treatment service. So being able to provide that is huge. I think also, in general, where we are technologically as a society, people are pretty comfortable accessing anything online. We're used to Facebook. We're used to that logging in. And from what I've seen, I had my own personal doubts, like, how will this work when I can't be in the room with them? How will it work when we don't have that interpersonal connection? But I think we do. I think a good example is this particular panel right here. I think the impact and the fact that it will be recorded and more people can see it than just the people who are watching it right now, again, shows the efficacy of this model. So, I don't, part of me is just biased. I think nothing will ever fully replace in-person services, but to have this as an option is completely viable.
Definitely. And I'm excited to hear your excitement about it. Because this is something that we hope, when we talk about things that we hope don't go back, I think this is one of the things from my perspective I hope stays. I hope we can break these geographic borders to access to service. There's another thing that has come up that I definitely want to bring up, and this goes back to our discussion about stigma. And we have stigma that is associated with our individual, our guys and our women who need to seek services. But there's also stigma in our systems. And so one of the questions, and this is really for you, Judge Kazen, one of our questions that came through was from an organization that's trying to educate judges around fatherhood issues, including mental health needs. And from my perspective, as somebody who's tried to intersect with this system a lot, what are the best tips for getting judges to come around?
You know, that's a struggle with judges because you've got to have that personal inclination to want to step outside the robe to help others. But I'm starting to notice, especially if you look at the whole new crew of probate judges, for example, that are in Houston and in Dallas, the judges that deal with mental health now are far more proactive than in the past. And that modality is changing with judges. You know, they're starting to say, well, how can we do it? We want to do it. If I were to train any judge, if I were to give any judge advice, it would go back to that very simple analogy. How do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time. Just do it. You know, look at the law, figure out how you can help one person make your mistakes with that one process and build it. You know, Bexar County, and I'm just a small part of all our diversion. Bexar County is a 15-year overnight success. You know, it didn't just happen. It took judges and the county and commissioners making commitments to steps to get there, and they can get there. You know, if I could get the other thing I would tell judges is they have to understand, and doctor, you're going to appreciate this. We speak two different languages. We do. And it takes a while for someone, for example, like me and others, to learn your language, and it takes you some time to drop your guard and learn our language. And when we really learn to speak each other's language as equals, instead of I'm a judge, I'm a doctor, I'm a judge, you know, those are two huge egos in the universe. But when we step back and learn each other's language, it's amazing, and you're starting to see it in Bexar County, in Harris, in Dallas, in Fort Worth. But the judges, just secondly, if I could give them any advice, is step back and learn another language. You know, when you're a hammer, everything's a nail. When you're a gavel, everyone's a defendant. You know, so don't.
Kazen, I want to bring you into this because you sit at the intersection of these two languages. And how do you navigate that?
I do. Well, fortunately, the great state of Texas was instrumental in my own recovery. So I have some personal experience with how all of that fits together, and I'm grateful for it. I'm definitely a success story. We also work very closely here in Harris County with the RIC Court and the Start Drug Court. And I have good friends and former colleagues that are part of those amazing programs. So I think we're seeing more collaborative effort there. I know there's at least the RIC Court we actually have a contract with to help their clients who need detoxification. So we can provide some services for them. I think funding, you know, is again one of the keys there. I think if funding allowed more intermingling of service and the judicial system, then we will see more of an understanding and a shared language. That's my personal assumption.
Definitely. So the last question I have for you, both of you, this is kind of a combination of 3 questions that have been coming in, and honestly, it's something that I deal with on a regular basis as well, is hotlines and emergency services. So when we like, for example, with postnatal depression, we give women a number to call, and there are several crisis hotlines for women with postnatal depression. And one of them fantastically is now starting to do crisis, other mental health crisis hotlines. Is there Is there a good one that you guys try to use, recommend? How can we move this out? Because this is one of those first steps to prevention and first steps towards getting somebody into services, are those hotlines.
At least in Bexar County, and I think I could speak for most of the counties in Texas. So in Texas, the money comes out of the state and into the different jurisdictions, and then it's dispersed by this thing called a local mental health authority. And they set up services with a provider. In Bexar County, our local mental health authority is the provider, and it's the Center for Healthcare Services. And they are an award-winning, fabulous organization, which pretty much does everything in Bexar County. But the Center for Healthcare, if you are listening to this webcast and you are from San Antonio, I highly encourage you to contact the Center for Healthcare Services crisis hotline at any time. If you're a veteran, the VA also has a hotline here in San Antonio and in the surrounding counties that you can call. And lastly, we have, forgive me, that was smooth. In Bexar County, a Texas mental health handbook and resources guideline book that you can get for free, and you can call here at this court 210-335-2190. I'll get it to you, and it gives you all the resources in Bexar County where you can go to. And again, 15 years ago, we never would have even thought of having one of these things. So we're making some progress.
So in Harris County, we have we have lots of amazing programs, but the two that come to mind, there's what was formerly known as MHMRA, is now Harris Health, and they have a hotline, which is the one that I would recommend people call. They do amazing work, and they have clinics throughout the city and can get people connected to services of all kinds, mental health, medical, whatever's needed. We also have the Council on Recovery, which is our local OSAR, which is what we have here in Texas. OSAR being an acronym standing for Outreach, Screening, Assessment, and Referral. So they receive money from the state to provide that screening and both. They do education, but they also do screening, and they refer people to services that are appropriate for them. So and that service is free of charge. So both of those organizations do amazing work in our community, and it's important to have their number in your cell phone.
Mm-hmm.
May I also make one last plug? In many jurisdictions, there's an organization, Nami, National Association for Mental Health. And Nami is a huge and fabulous resource in every community. It's made up of mostly parents and individuals who are going through the mental illness situation, crisis, or condition. But it's an all-encompassing organization that Nami really is a very personal lifeline to anybody who's struggling through this, family or patient.
Definitely, and they do some amazing trainings as well. So there's several questions about resources, and I'm just going to say, because I know we have to wrap it up, that what we can do is transfer some of these resources over to Cynthia's team and put them with questions and answers, hopefully, including some other hotline numbers that I know for mental health authorities in other jurisdictions across the state. I just want to thank you so much for both of your perspectives and for everything you've done to elevate and to make this such an important, to elevate this in importance. It is such a big issue for a lot of the work that we do, and being able to do upstream prevention for this is such an important thing. So I just thank you so much for being here and for speaking with me today.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you. Thank you, Dorothy, for moderating that panel. But thank you so much to Judge Kazen and Mr. Johnson for sharing with us what you're doing in your communities and the resources that you have to provide for families. We will add those to our Fatherhood Resource Hub. That is what we launched last time that we met, the first Fatherhood Friday. And we will continue to add resources there. If any of you watching have other resources that you think are important, hotlines or other services that really support fathers' mental health needs, please put them into the chat box or contact us directly, and we will make sure to share those as well. So thank you again for this important conversation and for helping us to better understand the needs that dads have and men in general, and how we might be able to begin to address them. So as we close out today, the other thing that we were promised to do was to reveal the grand prize winner for our innovative program that submitted a video to share with the state and others on our new Fatherhood Resource Hub. That we had several different contestants, and you all voted over the last 2 weeks, and we appreciate you voting. And it was a very tight vote because all of the different programs that were highlighted were so amazing. I also encourage you to go to the Fatherhood Resource Hub and look at those videos as well as others that are there. And we'll be soliciting more videos from you, I'm sure, so that we can add more. These are really a great opportunity for you to look inside an organization, to see what they were doing, how they support fathers and families, and to learn some of the challenges that they faced and how they overcame them. But we are excited to announce our winner today. And I actually didn't know about it, who the winner would be, until today. So I couldn't say anything because I guess my team really didn't want me to reveal it too early because I'm so excited about this. But this is a group that has been serving fathers in their community for many, many, many years. And we have looked to them to learn how they're doing it and to share their secrets with others. So please join me in congratulating the Fatherhood Coalition of Tarrant County as our grand prize winner for submitting their video and really representing how our communities can serve fathers. So congratulations to Merville and all of his team for all the great work that they've been doing in Tarrant County, but also sharing it across the state. So we're going to have a video here to show you the great work that they're doing.
Hello, my name is Merville Johnson. I am the co-founder and current chairman of the Fatherhood Coalition of Tarrant County. I'm sitting here in Fort Worth, Texas, which is where we are based. It's the largest city in the Tarrant County area. The Fatherhood Coalition is a voluntary association of individuals working together to promote responsible fatherhood in our community. And we formed the coalition back over 20 years ago. In fact, it actually started as an initiative. It was called the Fatherhood Initiative. I took on the role of Workforce Collaboration Manager in 1998, and my very first task, my mission was to organize a fatherhood coalition in Tarrant County. To do that, I had the assistance of many of the staff working here at Workforce Solutions. We came together and brainstormed about all the organizations that we were aware of, working with families to invite to a community meeting that we would host to share our vision of creating a fatherhood initiative. So that's how it started back actually in October of 1998. Once we had that forum, we organized into task forces around 4 subsets of fathers and began working together on a monthly basis. After a few months, we learned of another organization, a community group, a grassroots organization underway by Charles Scoma, who was the mayor of North Richmond Hills at the time. And once we learned of each other's efforts that we were both working to promote responsible fatherhood, we decided to combine our efforts and work together. And so in 2000, we actually dropped the label of Fatherhood Initiative, and we formally became a coalition of different agencies, community-based, from all walks of life, but all of us connected with the common goal of wanting to promote responsible fatherhood. The way that we have set goals as a coalition, we began, as I mentioned, by identifying groups of fathers that we wanted to focus on first in our initiative. And those groups were first teen fathers. We identified a second group that were fathers who had been mandated to pay their child support by the 4D courts. The third group were fathers who were incarcerated, so we wanted to identify services and programs that would be able to help those fathers upon their release when they were going back into their families and coming back into the community. So we wanted to find some constructive ways to assist them. And then the final group of fathers was called the at-risk father, which we believed any father could fit into that group. That's anyone who was not engaged in a positive way with his children, was disconnected in some way with his children. We wanted to be able to work on programs and services to address their concerns as well. The general purpose of the Fatherhood Coalition as it exists today is stated in our mission statement, and that mission is to strengthen the role of fathers and men in the lives of children in Tarrant County. We have been very successful. We have not stopped meeting since we organized back in 1998, 1999. We have met consistently on a monthly basis, on a volunteer basis without funding. But fortunately, we were able to get funding after over 10 years of meeting on a volunteer basis. The Administration for Children and Families sponsored a Responsible Fatherhood grant program, and we were successful in 2011 in receiving one of those grants for 4 years, where we were able to develop a comprehensive service project helping fathers and parents. The collaborating partners of that grant, there were 9 of us that came out of the Fatherhood Coalition that collaborated together on that grant to focus on the goals of economic stability, healthy relationships, and parenting skills. It was a very successful grant, and we were able to introduce many things in the community that are still in place today, even after the funding had ended in 2015. Some other projects that we are most proud of having accomplished as a coalition, I would think number one would be our Fathers Hall of Fame. We have been able to induct fathers each year into what we call the Tarrant County Fathers Hall of Fame. These are fathers who have been nominated by citizens, by family members, any residents who live or work in Tarrant County, nominate these outstanding men for their leadership and in terms of their families, as well as the community at large. Many of them take on additional tasks and responsibilities to assist the community. And so we have held that celebration at different venues since 2008, each year recognizing fathers, now having over 40 plus fathers that have been inducted into our Fathers Hall of Fame. The other project that we are most successful with has been our Dad's Pocket Resource Guide. It is a small guide that lists many community resources that we wanted to have at the fingertips of fathers that they could carry around with them and have access to resources that could help themselves and their families. Advice I would give to any organization or anybody wanting to start a coalition, your first thing I would encourage you to do is to identify community leaders who can help you to champion the need for responsible fatherhood advocacy in your community. Mayors, elected officials, organization leaders. So if you have community leaders as well as a strong organization, for example, Workforce Solutions has been the most consistent and strongest supporter of the Fatherhood Initiative and Fatherhood Coalition effort since we formed back in 2000, providing staffing, resources, sponsoring the publication that I just mentioned, the Dad's Pocket Resource Guide. So those are key elements to ensure that you will be successful when you have champions from the community as well as a strong organizational support. The last thing I would say is that you don't have to reinvent the wheel. There are many resources at the local, city, state, national level that can provide you with information and with resources for how to get started. And many of these there are free pamphlets and books and many other services. We would be glad to assist any organization. Feel free to reach out to our coalition here in Fort Worth, Tarrant County, as well as other organizations throughout the country. Best of luck to you.
Congratulations, Merville, and to all of the folks who are involved in the Tarrant County Fatherhood Coalition. We really appreciate, again, all the work that you have done over the last several decades and look forward to learning more from you as you move forward. I am so grateful again that you have all joined us today, our second of 4 Fatherhood Fridays, and we hope that you will join the next 2 as well. We have one coming up on July 10th. And I'll be joined again by my colleague, Dr. Dorothy Mandel. And we're going to talk about kind of fatherhood during the perinatal period, how important fathers are in supporting moms during the prenatal period, and how important it is that they're engaged with their infants right from birth, and some of the signals that it sends to us as a community if dads are struggling and are not involved. So please join us for that important conversation on July 10th. And we will wrap up our 4th of 4 Fatherhood Fridays on July 24th. And on that day, we will be joined by Leah Leone from the Texas Office of the Attorney General, their Access and Visitation Division. And she's going to moderate a panel of folks who work in domestic relations offices and family courts, so we can talk about this important issue of how we ensure that fathers, who are usually the non-custodial parent, have access to their children, that they are the co-parent, and that this isn't something that they're just visiting their children with, but that we can set parenting time plans and that parents can co-parent together, make decisions jointly, or get engaged in parallel parenting if being together isn't safe for them or their children. You should please register for those next 2 Fatherhood Fridays if you haven't yet. And we also ask that you submit questions in advance. We would like to know what you're interested in. And if there are topics that we haven't covered over this summer, please let us know. We're excited to be able to address the questions that you have, because the whole point of doing this is to better serve the organizations that are trying to serve our fathers and families. Again, let people know that you were here on Twitter, and let us know that you enjoyed this event, or that to provide us feedback on it. We'll be sending out more information to you next week as a follow-up. And again, if there are resources that you or your organization would like to share with us, either include them in the chat. There's a place on the Fatherhood Resource Hub for you to submit information about your organization. And we want to hear from you and share it with others. So please stay safe and healthy. And again, thank you for the work that you're doing to support our fathers, both in Texas and across the country. And we look forward to continuing the conversation with you. Have a great rest of your day.